All right, hello again, and thanks so much for joining me. I'm Frederica Whitfield. The people of Chattanooga, servicemen and women around the world, and the family of a Navy sailor are all mourning the loss of one of their own today. Randall Smith, a logistics specialist with the U.S. Navy, passed away from injuries he sustained during the shooting rampage in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is the fifth victim of the shooting. His death was confirmed by his step-grandmother. Smith was shot 3 times in the attack at the Navy Operational Support Center, and in the wake of the Tennessee killings that began with a drive-by shooting at a recruiting center near civilian storefronts, Texas now will be arming National Guard personnel across the state, and Florida is relocating storefront recruiting facilities to National Guard armories. 4 U.S. Marines were also shot in Tennessee in this week's attacks. Lance Corporal Squire Wells, Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Sullivan, Staff Sergeant David Wyatt, and Sergeant Carson Holmquist. There are more questions than answers at the moment. Investigators are looking for a motive that could have been sparked during a trip Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz took to the Middle East. A friend of Abdulaziz tells CNN that he was certain, quote, something happened over there and wasn't the same when he came back to the U.S. Abdulaziz's boxing friend Spencer Manning tells CNN's investigation unit that he spoke briefly with Abdulaziz at a fast food restaurant just 2 weeks ago.
There is absolutely no red flags. I wish I could give you a better answer, but no red flags at all. Just a normal guy.
Other friends and former coaches of Abdulaziz say they, too, are baffled how the man they describe as kind became a killer. Federal authorities are carefully analyzing an online blog that is believed to be linked to the Chattanooga shooter and may hold some clues about his motivation. Joining me right now to discuss is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and licensed psychologist Eric Fisher. Good to see both of you. All right, so Dr. Jasser, you first. This blog that authorities found, one post complaining about life on Earth, and another urges people to follow historic Islamic figures. What does this mean to you?
Well, I think the most important part of it, Frederica, is the part that he talks about wanting to establish Islam on earth. Basically, it's a supremacist-type mantra. You know, the old, at what point are we going to abandon this sort of symptomatic following of just violent extremism, where all we're doing is waiting for that final step, and begin to look at ideology? His blog clearly shows a supremacist mindset. If our Homeland Security was looking at Salafism, Wahhabism, this dominant establishment of the Islamic State, just like the Iranian Khomeinis or the Saudi Wahhabis, this doctrine is major. So in the Cold War, we had specialists looking at communism and Soviet supremacism. Today, we can't even talk about it because we're so focused about that last step. No, you're not. We can look at the nuances of his life, and yes, he had some violent streaks with MMA and his DUI, and look at whether he went to Jordan. But the bottom line is, he was part of this Islamist supremacism. He looked upon America as a force of evil. He was not only a terrorist, but was part of a global war. And until we engage in this long war of ideologies, we're going to continue this whack-a-mole program.
And then, Eric, how do you analyze this, especially when you hear from friends who say they didn't notice anything, this radicalization? Clearly, this might be an example of it happens, and there really are no outward changes.
Right, and I think we have to really make it clear that this subject is really about radicalization of Islamists. However, we have to look at radicalization at a nationalistic level, at a political level. It's happened throughout history many times, and we have to see what happens psychologically. If the history is true that he grew up in an abusive family and he witnessed abuse and or was abused and learned to keep that secret, that is a key factor in how he could live an ideal self where the outside world only saw what they were supposed to see, and have a whole different real and feel self internally about how he really felt about the world. That allows somebody to be able to put on their chameleon outfit and play different roles in different situations. And because he might not have had an outlet, because it was so potentially forbidden to talk about how you really felt, in the outside world, it allows for this whole inner world to bubble up and develop, and his hatred to be hidden.
And Dr. Jasser, I see you nodding on that, but I also have this excerpt of the blog believed to be written by Abdulaziz saying this: we have a certain understanding of Islam and keep a tunnel vision of what we think Islam is. What we know is Islam and everything else is not. And we don't have appreciation for other points of view and accept the fact that we may be missing some important parts of the religion. What do you suppose is being said here? This is a lot being said. But how do you decide?
Oh, absolutely. And it's so important for us to engage the fact, if you're going to engage Muslims, we need to engage Muslims that believe we need to reform against those ideas that are supremacist. He wasn't looking at being violent in those blogs, but clearly most Muslims, as we just finished our holy month of atonement in Ramadan and we're celebrating our holidays, the reason he acted out on the last day of Ramadan is he engaged in a supremacist mantra that America was anti-Islam, that he wanted to establish the Islamic State, and he called the Prophet not only a spiritual leader, but a political one. He said the friends of the Prophet, which is part of the Salafi ideology, had to act and act now. He said, don't let the scholars misguide you. So we need to learn from this that it's not just about violence. It's about the pool, the mantra, the global movement that includes hundreds of millions, be it the Brotherhood, the Taliban, the Khomeinis, or ISIS, that fuel this mantra that they want to establish Islamic states around the world. And that's what we can learn from his blog.
And if you think about some common denominators, whether it's the Tsarnaev brothers, or whether it's this young man, the notion that many of these young men who have been recruited or radicalized, whatever the language is that you want to choose, we're talking about early 20s as well. That is one common denominator that have been cited in terms of, is this a point in which there is a frustration of, you know, maybe people didn't necessarily see anything while they were in their high school years, but now they're out in the real world, so to speak, and are exhibiting these frustrations or internalizing these frustrations in a very different way.
Well, it's kind of like a seed that's planted early on. And you know, when we get used to certain things in our culture, we start to lose our moral compass in ways. And I think what we have to look at here is the important to see that a lot of what happened to me with him is he started to lose his way. He was losing his identity. He couldn't seem to hold a job or find a job in his field that he wanted to be in. He then had his drug issue, that his DUI arrest, which if you look at Osama bin Laden and many of his colleagues, they lived a life of excess in the Western culture, and they then blamed the Western culture for them losing their pathway.
You heard that with some of those, those who flew the planes 9/11.
Exactly, and he seemed to do the same thing, and he started to blame the culture for his own inner struggle. Whenever I'm working with people, I always say the outside world is a reflection for something you have to learn within yourself. It's not about blaming the world for our issues in life. It's about for us to see the pathway. And what bothers me is that here we have an institution in religion, of any religion, that's supposed to come from a place of unconditional love that becomes shrouded in so much hate.
All right, Dr. Jasser, real quick.
Yeah, his point is that it didn't come from within himself, though. He hopped on a train of Islamic supremacism that Muslims need to counter globally, and especially in America, where we understand the battle against theocracy. That's the train he jumped on. He wasn't necessarily a lone wolf in that.
Right.
All right, Dr. Judy Jasser, Eric Fisher, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.